Hi, everybody. I'm Judy the YouTube Lawyer. This afternoon, we have a special legal live stream. We have two attorney guests, both of whom are family lawyers. The first guest is a returning guest, Jonathan Noble, who has his own YouTube channel. It's called Jonathan Noble Esquire. He's based in Pennsylvania. And then we also have my friend Dana Bellingrath, who is a family lawyer in Raleigh, North Carolina. So both of them have a lot to talk about, but we're going to focus first on the Johnny Depp versus Amber Heard case and the verdict. So let's introduce our guest to the stream. Hi, Jonathan.
Hi, Judy.
Hi, Dana.
Hi, everybody watching.
Hi, Jonathan. Hi, Judy.
Yeah, so let's tell our viewers out there, if you have any questions for either one of the guests, or you have any comment in general, feel free to put it in the chat box, and we'll try to get to everybody if we have time. So first, Jonathan Noble, you graduated from Northeastern University undergrad, and then you also have an MBA as well as a law degree from Temple University, right? Correct? And you're licensed in 2 states?
Pennsylvania and New Jersey.
Okay, great. And so how much of your practice is family law?
Over 90%. I do a little bit of appellate work because I like it. But, and if I have a client that's got a DUI, occasionally I'll take it, but it has to be a very complicated DUI case because that's the area of law that interests me. Over 90%, family law, child custody, child support, alimony, equitable distribution, domestic violence. That's my wheelhouse.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah. And then Dana Bellingrath, you attended UNC Chapel Hill for undergrad, and then you graduated with honors from the NC Central Law School's evening program, right? That's very prestigious.
Yes, thank you. Yes, that's exactly right. So go Heels and Eagles.
Okay, cool. Okay, so first, we've already decided Jonathan is going to give us his impressions first of the Depp versus Heard case and the verdict. So what's your reaction to that?
First of all, let me just preface all the comments today that this is not legal advice, because we're not your lawyers. Only your lawyers can give you legal advice. I want to get this out of the way. Speak to an attorney in your jurisdiction if you have a specific question about your situation. Now, getting back to the Depp v. Heard case, I think it was wonderful that it was televised, first of all. I think more cases should be televised. I think all cases should be televised somehow, because a lot of people think that that was like an odd situation. And I'm here to tell you that cases like that, maybe not defamation cases worth millions, but domestic violence allegation cases are by the hundreds every month in many jurisdictions, where it's a he said, she said. And you don't get to see them because you're not in court normally. And I don't know if your jurisdiction allows spectators in domestic violence court. Most do. Most courts are open by state constitution. But if you haven't seen if you haven't had a chance to see a domestic violence case, that one's not so far out of the ordinary. Yeah, there are a lot more witnesses, a lot more money was poured in, there was a lot more at stake. But I've seen hundreds of these cases, and it's like comes down to credibility. He said, she said, and that's kind of what this case boiled down to through my lens, is who's telling the truth, who's got a motive, who has the evidence, who's believable. And I think the jury made the right decision, frankly. Actually, I would have given them more than 10 million compensatory, but they came up with that number somehow. I think that in my lifetime, I would like to see the camera in the jury deliberation room too. To watch how they interacted, how they picked a 4-person, how they thought about the evidence, how they sifted through the evidence. It's a fascinating process. And I wish everybody could have a bird's eye into what goes on into the deliberation room. So that's my initial spin. I'm going to hand it over to Dana.
Okay.
So I'll start in the front that I didn't come into this trial knowing any of the history. I have never considered myself particularly a pop culture buff. I mean, I've seen the movies. I vaguely had heard of her, mostly in correlation with Elon Musk is where my periphery. So I didn't come into it with any expectations or understanding. I didn't know about the UK trial. I had not seen any of the YouTube channels or social media where the justice for Johnny, like none of that. And I didn't start watching the trial until sometime around the second week. I think possibly right before or right in the middle of him testifying. And I was hooked. I, like many hundreds of thousands and millions of people that watched this, and I watched, I did not stream it on the TV channel sites. I actually, I love YouTube. So I was out watching legal commentators that were commenting on it and panels of attorneys. So that was fascinating. And what I found, so the good news was I went into it with no preconceived notions of who was at fault, whether or not this was true. I think the only preconceived assumption I had made was that celebrities do drugs and alcohol and drink alcohol, and that he was a bit of a weirdo. And his characters are often weirdos. So anything along those lines wouldn't have shocked me. What I remember, when I started listening to the testimony right away, because of the types of cases that I represent, I do a lot of domestic violence in a civil setting, not criminal. I don't touch criminal. I do a lot of high conflict custody cases where mental health issues are a factor. Substance abuse is a factor. So very quickly, I was like, wait a minute, this is a defamation lawsuit? This seems like a divorce. This is seeming just like every one of the divorce cases that the ones that I've had that are super high conflict, the domestic violence cases. I had actually just come out of trial in a case where, there had been, what I perceive of as false allegations of domestic violence by the female party against the male party. That had been used to gain custody advantage. So, I came into it having just come out of that experience. I also am a child of not domestic violence, a child of a high conflict divorce and parents with various personality disorders. So this, like, right away, I was like, this doesn't seem like a defamation. And now I'm intrigued, because this is reading so much more like we're watching their divorce. And like anybody else, people don't normally get a glimpse into the private life of a celebrity. And you don't know the celebrities, when they're out there, these are their personas. That's not them as human beings. And so, I just was so fascinated by that experience. And then as a lawyer, I was fascinated by the legal procedure and the techniques and the qualities and the distinction between his team, the legal team, and her legal team, and how glaringly obvious and what seemed to me like a very distinct difference in the skill level of the attorneys and the camaraderie that all of his team, aside from just being brilliant, and I am the biggest fan of Camille now, that was, to me, this became a masterclass in here is how you cross-examine. Here is how you, direct. And because her cross-examination, aside from the fact that it was just brilliant against Amber and brilliant technique in and of itself, it was really hard. And you didn't hear a whole lot of objections coming from the other side because it was so tight. She had prepared. They were so prepared but the relationship that they had, that they could help each other out, that in the middle of somebody testifying, anybody on that team would think of something else, put it on a Post-it, put it on a sticky note, hand it up to the attorney that was examining the witness, whether an expert witness, whether a fact witness, whether cross-examination. It would just seamless. And obviously you had the different styles of attorneys. And, you know, I kind of empathized a little bit with Elaine Braderhoff at the beginning, because I don't know about Judy or you, Jonathan, but I've certainly been in those cases where I just am struggling. That I have a client that is literally going rogue on the stand, that we have talked about everything, and that, you know, particularly if I'm the one asking them the questions on direct, the scary risk that we talked about a plan, we talked about a legal strategy, and then, but they get up there and they just, you ask the open-ended question and they're off to the races saying whatever it was that they want to say, even if it's a lie, even if it's massive lies, and the inability to cut them off.
Yeah. I've been in those situations too, where it's like, what? You didn't tell me about this before, or you're just making yourself look like an idiot on the stand.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. And I can tell you that what was very clear, you know, because I didn't jump into it from day one, I had to go back and rewatch some of the earlier witness testimony. So, I mean, I would have this on all day, kind of in the background. If I was, you know, working on something or on the phone or in a meeting, I would pause it and have to catch up afterward. I would then be like up watching this all night. There were times I fell asleep. And of course, like a lot of people, because now I'm like, what is this case? So now I'm all over the YouTubes, finding all of the other websites. Coincidentally, that umbrella man or that umbrella guy that Elaine was just all over. And I can't believe, I mean, the crossover between social media and a court case. It was just so fascinating. And I was like reading all of this evidence, and I was like, yeah, I know I'm getting information that the jury isn't getting, but I wasn't out there reading the UK evidence. It would be that there were recordings and, you know, you only use a clip of it during testimony, but the whole thing is there for the jury to listen to later. So I was listening to the entire recording of these conversations between Johnny and Amber. And I remember when he was on the stand, I knew that Dr. Curry was going to be coming to testify, that the court had ordered a psych eval. I didn't even have to wait till that happened. And I am, you know, A, this isn't legal advice, but B, I'm also not a psychologist. I have an undergraduate degree, but I am not qualified to make a diagnosis. So I am not diagnosing from my, you know, couch, but I am aware from personal experience and professional experience of what certain behaviors look like. And I was hearing a series of recordings that Johnny was playing, and I went, oh, I know what I think I know what her psych eval is going to show. And I was right.
Which was what?
So Dr. Curry came on after. So Amber was diagnosed with 2 different personality disorders. She was diagnosed first with borderline personality disorder and histrionic personality disorder. And of course, this whole case was always the battle of the experts. And there was another example that Depp's experts were just infinitely better directed, did a better job doing the different testing or analysis, whether a psychological expert or a social media expert or a digital expert. Every one of their experts, amazing testifiers. They all did fabulously. Even his, there was this guy, Richard Marks, who is the deal maker. I mean, he's got the merchandising rights. He got up there and he's talking about his history. He is the deal maker in Hollywood, has been in Hollywood for 40 years. He's testifying about pirates and all of that. I mean, it was just fascinating. I mean, I could talk about this case because, of course, I was obsessed.
Now what? It's over. What do you think of the verdict?
So I will say that I felt pretty confident he was going to win the first count. That the headline, because her allegations of sexual violence and her evidence, and, you know, without dogging on her, it just was totally not credible. It was so extreme. She never presented corroborating evidence or testimony that backed any of the sexual violence claims up. I personally didn't think that it would be appropriate for a jury to even perceive Johnny as having done physical violence to her, because I think it's unfair to attribute violence against the victim of borderline personality disorder abuse. Like the abuse of somebody, if you're dealing with somebody with that disorder, it's so triggering and so aggravating. And so to the extent that you stand up for yourself in one moment, I don't think that that's being a perpetrator of domestic violence when you're being attacked. But I thought sexual violence.
What about the award, the monetary award? Did you agree with that?
Honestly, he didn't give a crap about the money. They made that clear. And I think that the jury didn't have, it was an arbitrary number. It clearly, there was a lot of commentating. He could have gotten $1. There was some speculation that he might get $7 million because that's the amount of the divorce settlement that he had paid her that she didn't donate.
Mm-hmm.
I think he had justified the full $50 million ask, or at least 40 something thousand, with the $22.5 million loss from pirates and the $18 million of other, movies. But I knew that they were sending a message. I was kind of surprised by counts 2 and 3, but I think she was so awful and so despicable that a jury, I will say the jury instructions, I think, are the cause of some of the confusion with the verdict. Like, I think the verdict in her favor is due to confusion and assumptions built into the jury instruction.
Yeah. I'm going to grab the jury instructions, if you don't mind. I'll be right back.
Great.
I think those are critical for people to understand.
Okay, thank you. Thanks. So, Dana, was there some magic moment while you were watching the trial when you suddenly started thinking that, okay, I'm more for Johnny Depp as opposed to Amber Heard?
It was pretty quick in the process because of what I do and the types of clients that I often represent and my own personal knowledge of stuff. I thought he was incredibly credible. I think he did a fantastic job. I was open to the possibility that she could present evidence that would change my mind. But, he went first. So it's but between him and some of the other witnesses that corroborated his version of events from a fact standpoint, and then Dr. Curry, I was prepared for her to get on the stand and say just ridiculous, crazy things. Plus, by then I had also gone outside of it and been watching a whole bunch of the videos. And so I was very much, I was pretty quickly in the pro Johnny category. But had she done an effective job, I was not. There was a point where if she had raised doubt about the possibility that it was mutual violence, but I didn't think that it just was so clear, and she was just such a disaster.
I see.
I mean, she
Okay.
was just so bad.
Thank you. Well, I'm sorry we haven't been able to address a lot of the comments, but Tony wants to know, did Amber Heard ever make a police report, or was Depp ever? No, he wasn't, right? Okay.
No, she, we're talking, her testimony in this case was alleging that going all the way back to 2012, when they were first dating, he started out, the way she testified was horrendous, absolutely devastating violence of punching her in the face repeatedly, choking her against a wall, like going all the way back to early in their dating relationship. And yet they were together. So we're talking about over a 4-year span that she was describing. And there was no domestic violence. There was no, like, when domestic violence happens, the first incident is not that violent. It doesn't happen that way. It's a progression. So there's like a moment, somebody, and I think the first one, she tried to do that by saying, oh, he slapped me across the face. But this man wears massive rings 24/7. Like, he always has these on. The things that she described, she would have had to be in the hospital. You know, she alleged that he raped her with a liquor bottle. Like, some of the things were so extreme that it is illogical to think that she never went to a medical doctor and or a hospital. So she should have had medical records. Right. And she never called police.
There was never a trial either. Whatever happened to her initial domestic violence claim, which I think
they settled the divorce. And so it was an ex parte only. Right. And they like to make this out, you know, Judy, I don't know if they've got the whole ex parte process, but an ex parte is the defendant hasn't even been heard from. Right. So the judge is looking at the allegations filed by the plaintiff and saying, if all of these are true, they have to take it as true that based on this, if I treat all of this as true, is there adequate allegations that warrants entering an emergency domestic violence protective order before defendant gets notice of the hearing and has an opportunity to come to court to testify? That's all she had gotten.
Do you think she filed that as like a chess move in the divorce proceedings? Because I'm
very obviously,
yeah, probably.
Yeah. And there was even testimony during the trial that, you know, there were recordings of conversations, but on rebuttal, Johnny's team, a witness that had worked at TMZ, which is where the video, where the first photos of her were published on the Friday that she went in and got the protective order. He was in some kind of supervisory role that he would basically get the directions from somebody of, hey, we got a tip that Amber Heard's filing for a TRO today. She's going to the courthouse. You need to get a team of cameramen out there to catch this. When she comes out, she is going to pause, and there's going to be a bruise on the right side of her face. You need to capture that. And there is no way that they would have known to do that because they had gotten that tip before she went. So it obviously came from her side. And it was by her own testimony, she always wore makeup, which I don't think was 100% true. But that she even testified that she had started to put her tinted moisturizer on that day, and a friend had to remind her not to. It was so suspicious. It was so sus.
Yeah, terrible. Let me just ask you this: in your jurisdiction, if you file for a temporary restraining order, you have an ex parte hearing where it's just the plaintiff or complainant in front of a judge, kind of like emergency hearing. And then how long is it before you have your final hearing?
10 days.
10 days. Okay.
Yeah, there's a
Same in
minimum
Pennsylvania.
7 to 10 day period.
Right. And what's the burden of proof? It's a civil action. I think a lot of people don't think it's a criminal action, but it's a civil action. And the burden of proof in a domestic violence case is by a preponderance of the evidence, as opposed to a criminal case where it's by beyond a reasonable doubt. Now, if I were king for a day, I would change the burden of proof from a preponderance of the evidence, which is you're 51% more believable than the other person, and the other person's 49, just that a little bit, to beyond a reasonable doubt, because I've seen people's futures ruined. Professionals lose their license just based on someone's allegation. And, some of these cases are so close where it's he said, she said, and, I would tell people to protect themselves to the greatest degree possible. Is it also by a preponderance of the evidence in your jurisdiction? Yeah, that's a problem. Yeah. That's a huge problem in my mind.
Yes, exactly. But getting back to Jonathan, since you went to get the jury instructions, Tuan is curious to know, what are you going to do with those jury instructions? Can you tell us more about it?
Right. Okay. So I have the special verdict form. I'm assuming that both sides gave the judge their proposed jury instructions, and then she came up with her own. I thought she did a really good job, by the way.
She was excellent.
Yeah. Every time someone made an objection, I ruled on it in my own head. And sometimes we agreed, and a lot of times we didn't. But overall, I thought she was fair. I really do. She didn't favor anyone.
She was very fair. She managed the courtroom really well. It became very clear early on that she had every judge, to the extent that they've got judicial discretion. I think the hearsay objections, it was pretty clear early on how she defined hearsay. And because I watched a lot of them where, it should have gotten in under an exception, and she wasn't having it. If it was a witness out of court, she wasn't letting it in for anybody. And so she was just pretty rigid on that. And once you figured that out, you just didn't get worked up over it, because you just knew it was going to come. Like you knew it was going to happen.
One very subtle thing that non-lawyers watching the trial may not know is Depp's team, I thought, did a much better job of knowing when to object and knowing when to be quiet. And they let their witnesses run with their testimony. And then they were able to cross-examine them on all this extraneous stuff that didn't help Heard's side. So you have to be judicious when you're making objections. And I thought that Depp's side was good at that. And Heard's lawyers were objecting without really any grounds to try to throw off Depp's side. And I think it pissed off the jury. Like, let the case go on. Too many sidebars too. I
think the sidebars, honestly, there should have been more sidebars, because some of the problems were that Heard's lawyers kept doing speaking objections, which the judge did not allow. And that were in, as Camille said at one point, Your Honor, this is inappropriate, because the jury isn't supposed to hear that stuff. Yeah. They're not. And all the time, both Rottenborn, so my opinion of the two lawyers on Heard's side, the two main lawyers, I think Rottenborn actually had a sound legal strategy. They came into this case, the law was really in favor of Amber Heard. Tuan, he, I think, is a much better attorney of the two. Elaine, I think, and it's how to be nice about this.
Just let it out.
Tell the truth. Come on.
Oh, I mean, she's a disaster. But I think I don't know if she is. I mean, she's been around forever, and she's clearly, I think, what if any Elaine, as everybody came to talk to her, I think she does a lot of deposition work. I think she settles a lot of cases out of court. I have no idea how long or how often she is even in a trial court.
Right.
Rottenborn, I absolutely think it spends a lot of time, and he had a legal strategy that would have worked if they had stuck to it, but nobody could control Amber. And I think Elaine, personally, from an ethical perspective, my perception is that she very much drank Amber Heard's Kool-Aid.
Right.
And that's the danger when you represent a victim. If you're sympathetic to victims' causes, that you just buy into your client's version of events, no matter what evidence is presented, inconsistent with that. And while we all have an ethical obligation to advocate for our client and do the best job for them that we can, there's an element like, if you buy into it 100%, then I think you make bad strategy decisions. Mm-hmm. I think you make bad professional choices. And I think we saw a lot of that. I think they were not as prepared. I don't know what the financial situation was. I do think it was detrimental to Amber that she had a legal team that was comprised of attorneys from 2 different law firms. They were not all at the same firm.
Yeah.
I think that very much so. She had been with Amber all the way through the UK trial. So she's been in this, and she really, because some of the things she did that were unprofessional were, I mean, she was mocking Johnny Depp at one point.
Yeah, it's terrible.
It was so astonishingly awful and unprofessional that, both of them would get, and Elaine in particular, like Rottenborn, he could cross like a boss. Like I will say his cross-examination of Johnny was very, very good. His cross-examination of others and some of the other attorneys did a pretty effective job. It was Elaine that was always a disaster on cross. Both of them would get a little huffy whenever there was an objection. And Elaine in particular could never, once you started objecting, she would get huffy and arguing with the judge. Well, I think that should go in. I don't think that's wrong. I don't think that that's hearsay. I don't think that that's beyond the scope, blah, blah, blah. She would just object, and she would do speaking objections from the podium, which was inappropriate.
Why do you think that is? I think possibly they were doing damage control after every day, because they should have had a great strategy. All right. Heard's side.
If they had followed Rottenborn's strategy that was clear in his opening argument or opening statement, he had a very constitutional argument that if they had stuck with it, they would have won.
Why didn't
Johnny would have lost, they would have won.
Why did the wheels come off every day almost?
Because of Amber.
Oh.
So Amber, it was clear, was controlling all of it. She would write, aside from all the notes that I think were designed to try to prevent her face from making some of the faces she was making, and to keep her from losing her mind during the trial as she would be responding internally to the testimony, because of her disorders that I genuinely believe the diagnosis was accurate of. I think her lawyers, she very much was controlling what they could do and what they couldn't. And I think Rottenborn came in with a strategy, and Amber Heard said, screw that. I'm going to do what I want to do. I'm going to say what I want to say. I don't care. I've got the stage, and try and stop me.
She fell on her own sword. She fell on her own sword.
Absolutely.
Oof. It was cringeworthy when I was looking
and
at
if you think about it, a perfect comparison, if anybody goes back and watches this in a way that they haven't before now, it's worth going on YouTube and watch the first direct examination and of Amber Heard, where Elaine was doing the direct, and then go and watch the rebuttal direct. They switched, and Ben Rottenborn took over the rebuttal direct examination, and their chemistry was infinitely better. Where with Elaine, you could tell that Elaine and Amber were having some kind of personal beef that was, and it could have been as an attorney that's had a client go rogue that is putting me in a really impossible position to help them because they are just off script or off plan and saying wild and crazy stuff that I might ethically be impacted by if I'm the one that appears to be suborning it, if they're perjuring themselves. But Rottenborn he kept her in her lane from the moment it started. He said, this is all we're testifying about. We're on rebuttal. So let me put you where we are, and making it very clear to her, I'm not letting you do what you did before. And he kept her in control, and she also responded to him better. I mean, it was a little, some people have said it was weird when he would refer to her as Amber, and she would refer to him as Ben, and that got a little weird, but I didn't even notice it until people commented on it. But they clearly had a better flow, and she didn't go quite as wild and crazy. I mean, you can't control her completely, but he just did a much better job. And it was a shame he wasn't doing the first one because she wouldn't have been quite as bad. And maybe he could have kept her on track with his strategy in a way that Elaine couldn't or wouldn't.
Let me ask you this. You have a client like Amber Heard. You're going to prep her if you're doing your job. And let's assume they did their job really well. One thing that I would say to her as she was testifying the day before, don't mention Kate Moss, whatever you do, because you're going to open the door to bring her in to testify, which is exactly what she did. How can you have such hubris and not listen to your lawyers? I'm sure they told her. Every good lawyer would tell their clients they'll prep them on direct, on cross. What happened there? I mean, it's just total disregard for the people you're paying to defend you, and you bring this stuff in.
Yeah.
If you understand the mental health disorders that she has, it was predictable. It is not possible for her to be any different than the way she was. And frankly, one of the strategies that if they had just avoided the sexual violence, that's what I think Ben Rottenborn would have stopped her from testifying about. He would have not allowed it. He would have been I think he would have said, we're not talking about that. Our strategy is that headline didn't come from you. You didn't write it. Nothing else in this article mentions Johnny Depp committing sexual violence. Do not bring that up.
Yeah. Yeah.
If they had done that, it's possible that the jury, if all other things had been equal and she had only testified about the physical violence, it's possible we might have had a similar outcome on the second and third claims. But the first claim, frankly, was the only one that he should have had a prayer of winning.
Right. But she admitted on cross-examination, if my memory serves me right, that she did write the article. She even said it in that way. You know, I wrote the article because...
Well, that too. And again, if she had been controllable.
Yeah.
Pardon?
Sounds like she was a pretty crummy client who wouldn't listen to her attorneys due to her personality disorder.
But there was so much at stake. And you got to think that they prepared her. It just came off the rails, I guess.
Yeah.
I think that's part of her issue. So this Tawan is asking, going back to the whole jury instructions thing. Do you want to take that, Jonathan? Or
yeah, yes. I mean,
Usually both sides can, submit their proposed jury instructions, but a lot of times, this is all stuff that's already like pre-printed, at least in our state. You can find sample jury instructions and just use those.
Yeah, you can modify them a little bit.
Yeah, even Virginia had model jury instructions that are your basic, but jury instructions are another place where a lawyer can win or lose a case because there are nuances and the wording of those instructions. And certainly in this case, they did hold the judge referenced it, and there were cameras on during pre-trial, like motion arguments. And there was an entire day or an afternoon that they had gotten down to where there was like 3 or 4 different sets of jury instructions that they weren't in agreement on. And we got to watch them argue these. I think that there was still a miss because much more so, there was one confusing thing. I thought, the jury instructions have the elements of the claim. So, and there's definitions in all the pages. And so I did think that it was confusing. I don't have them in front of me, but my memory of it is that like question 3, like sub 3 on Johnny's claims, I thought it was weird that the question of the statement is false was in the middle of all the stuff about was it defamatory to Johnny Depp directly, or was it about him? Was it defamatory? Was it by implication about him? And then
I have the questions here.
Yeah.
So let me just chime in for a second. Most of the questions were, was the statement made or published by misheard? So if you don't get past that, you don't keep going. And that's the way these are set up, which is good, because as soon as, if you get a no on any of the Depp v. Heard case, if you get a no down the row, it's over. That count is not going to be, she's not going to be found guilty. Statement was made or published by Miss Heard. Yes. Statement was about Mr. Depp. Yes. Was the statement false, which is what you're referring to, Dana? Yes. The statement has a defamatory implication about Mr. Depp. And the answer is yes down the row on these questions. What's fascinating is he's not specifically named in the article, in the published Washington Post article. Yet, through good lawyering, they were able to convince a jury that she implied it was about him. That's fantastic. Defamatory implication was designed and intended by Ms. Heard. Yeah. I don't care who drafted it. She admitted on the stand she wrote it. So, due to circumstances surrounding the publication of the statement, it conveyed a defamatory implication to someone who saw it other than Mr. Depp, which means it was made public. If the only person that saw it was him, it can't be defamation. Right. But she also tweeted it. She tweeted the link. So she sent it out to all of her followers who could have retweeted it too.
Yeah.
Right.
Boom. Here's the issue.
That was the republication issue that was really important for the first count, much more so than the rest, because the first count, the testimony that came in was she didn't write that headline for the online version. That was drafted by an editor at the Post. If they had stuck with, I didn't write it, if she had never, and there's been a lot of use of retweet versus, but what she did was what they call a quote tweet, which is she included the link to the online article where that headline was clearly in it. Had she only done that and said nothing else, it wouldn't have been able to be attributed to her legally.
But the article, and I have it right here, the byline is by Amber Heard. So
it still wouldn't have, though.
Okay.
The issue, because of the fact that there was no testimony that she had even written it. So
she admitted to writing it on cross-examination. Would you agree with that?
She admitted to writing the article. She never admitted to writing the headline. She admitted that the headline was true in her mind. But her beliefs would not be like, even if that's where opinion is not defamatory. You can make statements that are not true, but if you believe that they're true, or it's your opinion that they're true, and that was an opinion piece. So it was an op-ed. So I think the first claim was the statement in the headline, which is the only place that, but I think getting to, was it about Johnny Depp? I think that was very obvious, but it was about the fact that it was the claim of sexual violence. And the issue was, since she wasn't involved in the original crafting and drafting of that headline, that was not part of the articles she was engaged with, that just the editor at the Post put it there. Had she not talked about the sexual violence, that would have been one thing. But the other element was where she could be held liable, even if she didn't write it, is the fact that when she tweeted the op-ed on Twitter, she did it through a quote tweet wherein she added language. She wrote something where just retweeting the link and saying nothing about it. But in her tweet, she said, I wrote this article and so it had the link, and the link included the headline.
Right.
So by posting that, and I think because she was talking about the Violence Against Women's Act, but I think she took that headline on as herself when she made that statement and published that online.
Right. I think that hooked her.
Yeah. I mean, I don't think it was any question about that, honestly, once she testified. I think had she not testified that the way she did, if she had not mentioned any of the sexual violence, and if she had said, but I wasn't talking about him there.
But she didn't do that.
But she didn't.
All right.
But that's the way she could have won.
I want to bring something up that I think is important for the lens of lawyers. On each question on the special verdict form, in the case of Depp against Heard, it says, if you answered yes to each subpart, answer the following question. Do you find that Mr. Depp has proven by clear and convincing evidence that Ms. Heard acted with actual malice? Now, that by clear and convincing evidence is the highest standard under the law. It's higher than beyond a reasonable doubt. It's higher than by a preponderance of the evidence. I have to, from what I've seen, she fell on her own sword. I saw the malice coming out of her actions and the way she testified it and the refusal to take any responsibility. What do you think? Did they prove their case by clear and convincing evidence that she acted with actual malice? And this question is important because it affects any possible appeal and whether or not she can discharge this in bankruptcy with a finding of actual malice. You think they proved it?
So a couple things for the viewers to understand. When we're taught actual malice and by clear and convincing evidence or standard, that burden, actual malice is the burden of proof that goes beyond preponderance because of the fact that the parties involved were celebrities, people with in the public eye. So it raises the standard. Then, like, Jonathan or Judy or I, we're not people that are out there well known. So it might have a different standard for us if we were arguing defamation than Johnny Depp or Amber Heard.
Right.
So it raised the standard of proof that was required. And it's not malice as she's hateful. I mean, I think absolutely that was there. What they're meaning by actual malice in this context is that she either knowingly that she knew the statements she was publishing were false, or that she published these false statements with such a reckless disregard for the truth.
Right.
Not about did she do it because she's mean to him, not the way the average person thinks about the word malice. You know, all of that might be there. And the thing to understand is the jury is not lawyers. The jury,
Right.
you can explain what actual malice is, but I think it's real easy for people to fall back on their perception of it. And so the fact that she wanted to hurt him, you know, I think it hit both marks. I believe that she did it on purpose. And that's the way to be thinking about it. When you think about malice, did she do it knowing she was being a lying liar who lies, which is her problem? She's a lying liar who lies, and she does it for her own benefit. And she knew she was lying about it, or did it, or should have known that it was a lie and said it anyway and didn't care. I think in either event, they hit that standard because of the way she is, because of the way she testified, the things she testified about. It was clear that it was intentional.
Yeah. And the recordings, right? Like all the recordings that made her sound totally unhinged.
Do you think she's reflected at all on what she's done?
Nope.
No, I agree. I don't think she's
Look at what Elaine's been doing since then. Look at the article. I mean, the fact that she is trying to take this, I'm here for all victims of domestic, which is so offensive, by the way.
Yeah.
That this application, that this ruling is detrimental to true victims out there. No, it is a problem. It's a setback for liars. Right. I mean, that's the problem, not victims, because the victim in this case was, in fact, Johnny Depp.
I agree.
And so if he had been, I mean, it is not setting back women, and it isn't setting back true victims of either gender. By that, it is a setback for liars, and good. I mean, that's good. I hope it makes it less likely that lying liars who lie will use this to their advantage. Do I believe that that's actually going to be the case? No. I mean, I don't see.
You think she should be prosecuted for perjury?
No. Because the district attorneys have other cases that are more important to pursue, and who cares? I mean, you know, there's also, you've got some indemnity within of saying, like, she can't be pursued, you know, nobody can pursue defamation over the lies she told on the stand. And, you know, I think everybody would love to feel like she gets criminal charges over being a lying liar who lies. But ultimately, there are murderers to put away.
Sure.
Yeah.
There are serious crimes, and Amber being a liar, she had the consequence. She lost.
Yeah, exactly. And I think, like, a lot of people have really low opinions of her now. So she's definitely, you know, gone down in terms of popularity and followers.
I don't know if she'll ever be able to recover. I think recovering for her is going to require something that I don't know if she's capable of doing, which is self-reflection, some serious mental health treatment to acknowledge her mistake, and she'll never do it. She's going to die on this hill.
Exactly. Yeah. Or public apology, which is never going to be seen from her.
Oh, that'll never happen.
Well, going to Serena. Thank you for being here, Serena, and everybody out there who's watching. She just wants to know, like, in our opinion, is the length of the trial considered short, or how long do trials such as this last? I think it lasted so long because they had the money to fund all this cost, because most of the time our clients have limited budgets. They don't have enough money to have us attorneys keep arguing for 6 weeks, much less 2 weeks. What do you guys think?
Most trials are not this long.
I agree. There's just a lot at stake, and they had the money. So I think
there was a lot of witnesses,
right?
A lot of years of testimony to deal with. a lot of allegations, and that takes time to build.
Yeah, I think if the judge didn't say this trial's going to end on this Friday, I don't care if you're in the middle of an examination of a witness, it's over, and I'm only giving you so many hours. That was a good idea, because they'd still be going now, you know.
And she managed them like she was really. I mean, there's apparently some people have talked about the fact that her background is in the military.
Yeah,
and so that explains. But she was very. She's also the chief district judge in that court district. So she's the head of it. She had the case had originally been heard by the former chief district judge, who made it past summary judgment or motions to dismiss prior to actually proceeding. But then she got it, so she didn't assign it to anybody else. She went, "Oh God, this is my monkey. I have to deal with it." But she was fabulous. I mean, because she was in front of the jury, she didn't give much away. But when the jury was out of the room, she joked around with the lawyers. She was kind to both of them. Imagine how frustrating if you were the judge and Elaine not being able to remember to turn her mic on over and over and over again. And Elaine works in that. That's where Elaine's practice is. So they should be pretty familiar with one another. And I could tell the judge was getting pretty frustrated with Elaine's inability to avoid objections with her questions on direct. And that's where the whole what if any part of it comes in, because Elaine her fallback, and one of the ways she's much more a deposition lawyer than a trial lawyer, is that every time she couldn't get something in, her backup was to do a what if any, like that was the great cure-all.
Right. I agree.
And the judge tried. I mean, at one point she actually helped Elaine by telling her, here's what you should ask.
Oh,
because she just wanted it to finally go somewhere.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. I thought the judge did a great job for sure.
Yeah. She was excellent.
She's a rock star too, right? So let's answer Tony's question. What did her donating to the ACLU have to do with that? Yeah, I do wonder, like, why were they able to ask her about that?
Doesn't that go to her credibility?
It's actually got 2 or 3 different components. The article that she published was ghost written by the ACLU.
Oh.
It was she was in the process, and it was part of how this went to her motives. She became a ACLU ambassador because of this. So it was tied up with the discussions that they had. They wrote the initial article, and then it went back and forth between attorneys and all of that. But they were the ones who really got this going and probably knew to put it in the Washington Post, which is a real legit newspaper, not a tabloid. And so that was one of the components. The other component was from a credibility standpoint, she had gone out, and it was relevant to the question of actual malice. And was this for a personal benefit? Because she, in correlation with her ambassadorship that she got, and all of this also, you have to know, the article got published right before Aquaman 1 was in theaters. So it was all correlated. But the issue with ACLU is that she had made public, repeated declarations that she was donating all of her $7 million divorce settlement to charity. And she had picked these 2 charities, and that she had pledged $3.5 million. And let me clarify, she had only pledged, but what she said over and over and over again, including getting into a back and forth on cross-examination in court, which I think was a death knell for her.
Yeah, I saw that.
was the distinction between a promise to pay and actual payment.
Right.
A
I
pledge
agree.
versus a donation.
Yeah.
And she lied. And so the credibility component is if she lied about this in the jury instructions in this case, and in any defamation case in Virginia, which I'm not a Virginia attorney, but in Virginia, the instructions over and above the final questions on the verdict, in the instructions, it said, you as jurors are not evaluating this case with specialized knowledge. It is with your, you can't go out and do any further research, but it's common sense. And
Right.
you are capable with any witness that's on the stand. You can accept all or part or none of any witness's testimony. And if, thanks. And if you feel that this person was not credible on one thing, you can even choose to discredit everything that they say. Even if you thought one or two things might be true, you could basically totally discount any of their testimony, which for Amber, given all that, I mean, that's basically where it went, was that if she lied about this, what else might she be lying about?
Right.
And there was lots of places that they managed to show she was a lying liar who lies, but
Right.
the pledge was certainly one of them. And so it went both from the credibility standpoint, can you believe anything she's telling you? And also from what was her motive behind publishing this article and saying these horrible things about Johnny Depp by implication. And,
yeah. Let me just ask you this, just to stay on this couple. If you had a time machine and we could put Johnny Depp back in time, would you tell him to do anything differently?
Don't get married to this crazy, like, borderline person.
People were trying.
Bingo, Judy. Don't get married.
That's what you
if you didn't marry
People
her,
were telling him that, though. People
saying
were
that on your
telling him
YouTube channel.
Why
Don't
didn't
get
he
married.
listen? That was the biggest mistake he ever made.
Because when you listen to his personal history, his mother probably also had borderline. And he is a child of really severe abuse by his mother. And I think that there was probably a component of, there was a part at the beginning, she was his ideal perfect woman, that she presented herself in this ideal.
She love bombed him.
Oh, absolutely. And
Narcissist.
by the time he started figuring out, I think he didn't want to feel, because he had, for what it's worth, he cheated, I think. I think the timeline is he started hooking up with Amber while he was still married to the mother of his children.
No,
or
he
not
was never married
but
to her.
Not married, but they had been in a 14-year,
but not married.
Right. But a committed relationship that he, I think, was unfaithful to her because he got so
smitten.
Yes.
With Amber during the Rum Diaries. But
yes.
Why would he go into a situation and marry someone after not being married all that time, dating Kate Moss in his life, dating Winona Ryder? What was this guy thinking? He was very wealthy.
He loved her all the way up until even after the TRO. He absolutely, legitimately, I believe he absolutely was gobsmacked in love with her. And they were a terrible, toxic couple for each other.
I think he was trauma bonded to her.
Oh, I do believe that too.
I mean,
you're in it. It's sort of like being a hostage and falling in love with your captor. And I think his own mental health issues and, his way, codependency. I think he had severe codependency. This is a guy that, because of his celebrity, and he's a very shy person, and he basically is homebound. And he was first he had to recover from the opioid addiction, but I think ultimately the coping mechanism of drugs and alcohol numbed him to it. And I think he also, when you connect his testimony about his male figure growing up, his father, who was a victim of domestic abuse from his mother, who had taken it stoically, that there's a male ego or a male view that you just don't walk away. And you don't, like, I do believe that he was emulating his father, who had taken it for years. I mean, his father took it for all of his life until his father finally had enough when Johnny was 15.
So what's the takeaway to anybody watching this video now to prevent them from getting in a situation? I think these situations happen all day, every day, by the thousands, maybe not with as many zeros at stake, but there's so much abuse, emotional, financial, physical. What can people do to protect themselves? I have some thoughts, but why don't you chime in and let us know what you think?
Yeah, I think people need to have more self-esteem. Maybe that's why so many people we know are in therapy now, because they need to learn how, what is normal in a relationship and what's not worth it. Because I still have plenty of clients, and you wonder, like, why did you stick with this person? Why'd you even marry this person? Or why'd you have kids with this person if you already saw all these red flags?
Right.
And it's not until after you have multiple children with this person and you've already married them, and then suddenly you realize what a horrible person they are. I mean, I think, like, sometimes people get married too quickly.
I mean, it's, I'm not a psychologist, so.
But you studied it. Yeah.
But and I deal with a lot of it. I would say that these types of relationship dynamics, I think it's not uncommon if somebody has an unresolved issue from their childhood that they have not actually processed. It's also, I mean, the reason people can be gaslit, I mean, we see that happening. I mean, what do spin doctors on politics do? I mean, people get gaslit all the time. And you can't, the average person does not view the world the way a bunch of lawyers do. I mean, and even lawyers can get suckered in. I mean, look at what I think happened with Elaine, is that if you're an empathetic lawyer, which I think many family lawyers, I imagine you are this way, Jonathan, and I know Judy is, you get into this because you feel emotionally for people and want to help them. And particularly if you represent somebody who has been through that experience. And I mean, I know I'm an empath. Like, I know that is a positive and a challenging quality for me to have, because it makes boundaries for me sometimes very difficult because of the fact that I'm so empathetic to the person.
Would you be able to whiff out a narcissist in your life? You're an empath. Let's say, can you detect? You have a
I'm a child. I mean, thank God my parents, well, one of them is no longer alive, but I know my dad is not going to find this, but I'm a child of a narcissist, and I have always been aware of the way narcissism presents. I didn't learn about what it was like. I believe that my mother, who has passed away now, but I suspect that she probably had borderline herself. And she died not long ago after having dementia. But I realized in my 40s that I had a codependency issue with her, terrible boundaries. And whether it's a narcissistic parent or a borderline parent, children are not taught boundaries, because neither of those disorders, it can tolerate them.
Right.
Um,
Right.
I
That-
had terrible boundaries.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Wow.
I had to do a lot of therapy to learn how to put a boundary up. And it was really, really hard for me. And it created difficulty because I would get taken advantage of financially by clients because I would commit to be emotionally taking on their, oh, now we're in it. And so I would be doing all this work without somebody necessarily paying me.
Right. That's
for
not
it.
fair. That's
Oh, it
Yeah,
definitely
exactly.
isn't.
But Dana, now that you work for a law firm, like, do you feel like it's easier for you to set those boundaries now that you no longer have your own solo practice?
That would be one of the reasons I don't have a solo practice. Yes, because I can, I'm also better at putting boundaries up.
Yeah.
I have also evolved. I did work on that and got to the point that I recognize that, I am not responsible for the terrible jerk that's on the other side that my client is a co-parent with or divorcing. I didn't marry that person. And
right.
so, I'm not responsible for my client's situation. Like, I'm sorry if you can't afford this, but you're the one who had a child with somebody who is an a-hole or is a jerk, or somebody who's histrionic or whatever it is. Like, I didn't marry that person.
One of my favorite books that I recommend. True
Interesting.
Empathy with a Jerk.
I love that.
It's so common. Anybody that's thinking about getting married and having children, you got to think about, what if things don't last till death do you part? Is this somebody I can co-parent with? Over
Right.
50% of first-time marriages end in divorce. So you got your head in the clouds if you think that you're gonna, somehow beat the odds. A lot of times it's out of your control. The other person could grow apart from you, or you didn't vet carefully enough, and then
Or
maybe
you evolved as a person. And,
right.
particularly if you marry young, I think I'm not trying to, I think women probably change a lot more over time. But, I can certainly say I was married in my I met my first husband when I was in my mid 20s, and I had been always living at home and he took care of me. And who I was within 8 years of that, we split up when I was halfway through law school. We had an amicable separation. We did not have children, but I could tell you that as a child of a high conflict divorce, I cannot personally fall in love with somebody until I can visualize what a divorce would be like with that person.
Wow.
No.
I have
Interesting.
like my first husband, I was evaluating him as a potential co-parent, and much more so than a spouse. And whether or not we had ever gotten married, I was wanting to have children with him, which we didn't end up having, but I was assessing him from that. And I was saying, if we split up, what kind of co-parents will we be? I do not want this experience for my children. And so before I even knew that I could be, had not fallen in love with him yet. I was assessing that when we were first in the dating, because I could not allow myself emotionally to be vulnerable enough to fall in love with somebody until I already knew how it would be respectful, and that, are they going to be like my parents? Are we going to be like that? Are we going to be nasty and vindictive and hateful, horrible things about each other?
Mm-hmm.
And once it helps that my first husband and my current husband both had been married before. And so I could see how they came out of that first marriage and how they were talking years later about their first spouse. And so I could tell how they were going to be about me. And I knew how I am not, despite what I do for a living in my personal life, I don't want a lot of conflict.
Right.
I my
zero tolerance in my personal life because I'm battling every day, all day.
Yeah, I can't.
Yeah.
So I'm with really nice guys. Like my ex-husband and my current husband are both really good guys. They were both kind and not high drama. Coincidentally, they're both Tauruses, so they're both stubborn and don't let me steamroll over them, which is nice. I need that balance.
You can admit it. You like the fact that they're strong-minded.
Yes, absolutely, clearly, because I married 2 of them.
But they're still nice. Well, what about you, Jonathan? Like, have you had to kind of evolve in the way that you treat your family law clients, or were you ever kind of like suckered in too much by some of your
I'm such an
clients?
asshole. I'm going to tell somebody if I don't agree with the story they're telling me. I always know there's 2 sides to every story, sometimes 3 sides. But a lot of times on an initial consultation, I'll say, let me get this straight. You're coming here and telling me that you guys haven't slept in the same bedroom for 5 years and that he never gives you any money and you pay for all the kids' school supplies and everything else. And, a lot of this stuff doesn't add up. And then when you do discovery, if I get a whiff of something that really didn't sit right, my retainer agreements are also very comprehensive. This is what I'm doing for you. And you have to get back to me within a certain period of time when I reach out to you. And you can't withhold any information from me. I'll decide what to give the other side based on discovery rules. But I'm not running after you. If you want,
I hate that too.
Yeah, I'm not going to run after you. But if you want the best results, you have to listen to me. Because if you're not going to listen to me, go hire somebody else. Why are you going to pay me? Or
they can represent themselves if they think they're so much better than their own attorney.
Exactly. But on the other side of it, I've had many clients still send me holiday cards. After the cases are over, they're hugging me, they're crying, tears of joy. I get them out of the worst situation imaginable and change the trajectory of the rest of their lives. But it's a lot of hard work, but I love it. You love it. There's nothing like getting a great result for somebody who appreciates it and someone who really needs you. So that's what makes it all worthwhile. So.
Yeah. Well, that's good. I'm glad you have that attitude towards your practice. Yeah. So
what about you, Judy? Tell your audience how you approach your clients.
Oh, well, I mean, same with you, that I really value honesty. So I try to tell the clients from the beginning what my honest assessment of their case is. And if they don't like what I have to say, well, so be it. I'm not that desperate for income that I'm going to take on a total a-hole for a client. And there have been some people within the last year, even in the initial consultation, I really didn't like the person already. Or I could see like this person seems like a real jerk, or it seems to, this person already did all his research on the internet and he's quoting me stuff that he found on the internet about family law. So I'm like, it's like, forget it. You have to just kind of weed out some of the people who might be the problem clients, first of all. And just like you guys both said, a lot of times you end up advocating for your client, but then you start finding out some little lies that the client's been telling you or embellishing, or, okay, so the other person really isn't as bad as you've painted him out to be, or you've done some of the same bad stuff that you're saying your spouse did. And so, I mean, that's why I find it kind of interesting that, Elaine, is her last name Breda Hoft? Or I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that right.
Yes.
But, like I read somewhere that she was actually crying after the case was over and people had to comfort her like out in the hallway. And, like it's not worth it to me. It's not worth like all the emotional stress that carries on to my personal life, to be so emotionally vested in clients' lives. And I was just telling a guy who's going to law school the other day. I was telling him, well, you know, you kind of have to realize that the client is just your client. Once their case is over, you're never going to hear from them again. Most likely, they're not your friends. And some of these people might turn around and threaten to file bar grievances against you or demand refunds. So don't get too emotionally tied to your clients.
Yeah,
well, and if you, I don't know, I'm sure both of you have had this experience because you do family law. And if you deal with clients that there is high conflict issues, some of those, you know, one of the things that I really struggled with, you know, I've been doing this now for, gosh, I think I'm 12 years. And I am less patient with it. And, you know, it's just common in family law to get burned out. And what I have found is the ones that I relinquished my boundaries for, that I put, you know, the ones that I put umpteen hours into, who then didn't pay me, also weren't very grateful for everything that I had sacrificed for them. And when you've had enough of those, it's kind of like, you know, I hate to say that it hit the point of, you know, you do this, not that I'm doing it for the gratitude, but it's nice to have somebody acknowledge the effort that you put into that. And maybe it wouldn't have even made you as resentful over what you didn't get back had, if they at least showed appreciation and gratitude for it. But when they're constantly complaining, or it's nothing is ever good enough, or the most frustrating thing and the difficult thing when you are in a high conflict case, and I don't blame them for this, but I play devil's advocate with my client, and I let them know, like, I am being harsh with you because the other side's going to be harsh with you, and I'm trying to prepare you for it. And that doesn't mean that I'm not on your side and that I'm not going to advocate for you when I'm talking to opposing counsel or when we're in court. But between you and me, your position on this is BS or isn't reasonable. I don't want to hear anymore anytime I ask you a factual, did you do this? Or if you engage in one bad act. What I can't stand is the client that won't even acknowledge bad behavior on their part and make it a big complaint. Everything is, well, but what about what they did? And constantly redirecting. And I was like, but we're not talking about what they did. We're talking about what you did. I'm just asking you, did you do this? Yes or no? Why did you do it? And how, so you don't do that again in the future, because you're making my job harder. You're making this case harder. And I want you to win. I want this to go better for you. And if you don't follow my advice, and if you keep spending the time we could be having with me having to fight you to accept a different point of view or to acknowledge or admit to your own accountability, then, and I spend too much time fighting with those clients like that.
Yeah.
And I'm like sick of that. Like I'm just over that.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Very interesting. But you're trying to actually do a service for your client by being contrary and calling them out on their lies. You know, that's definitely part of being a good attorney, is that you have to play devil's advocate and prepare them correctly and encourage them to be honest with you before you get in front of the judge. Yeah. But we're totally kind of switching gears, but let's try to wrap things up. Tuan wants to know, what does love look like? What an open-ended question.
Go ahead, Judy.
Baby, don't hurt me. No. Yeah. I would say, I think I mentioned this on Jonathan Noble's live stream when I was a guest on your channel a couple of months ago, that normally you have to make sure everything is good while you guys are dating. If you're already seeing red flags and you're not happy while you two are dating, or the person's family really hates you, or somebody in the family that's influential rubs you the wrong way, or you have like major differences in terms of, say, like if religion matters to you, or political beliefs, or how to raise children, I mean, there are so many ways that people can just butt heads. So if you're not already really happy and, say, like 95% satisfied with everything before you guys get married, then don't get married because
Yeah.
it's only going to get worse once you get married and you already know the person for years, and the newness of the relationship has worn off, and you have to deal with all these other relationship, issues of being a family together and budgeting together and doing family stuff together. So things got to be almost perfect.
Yeah. I think it all starts with self-love. You got to love yourself first and be completely comfortable in your own skin and not expect somebody to make you happy, because that's a recipe for disaster.
Or whole.
I've had people come into my office for a prenup consult, and they decided after we had a lengthy conversation or two, maybe they shouldn't get married at all because the other person depended upon them for happiness. You'll never, that's a losing strategy. So you got to be happy in your own skin and be comfortable with yourself and confident and not worry so much what the other person thinks. And it should be effortless. If it's too much work, it's not going to work out. That's just my 2 cents.
Totally. Okay, well, the same thing here. Serena wants to know, how do you know you met the right person to date and marry? How do you reduce the chance of getting a divorce and make a marriage long lasting? You guys want to jump in?
I'm going to jump in here because I'm going to say there is a musical artist, like a singer, this guy, David Wilcox, who is based out of North Carolina. And my husband actually just came by and was giving me the thumbs up because he introduced me to him. He is based out of Asheville, North Carolina. He's kind of James Taylor-like. And he has a song called Start With the Ending, because that's all about the fact that on a first date, and when people are early on in their relationship, they present their best version of themselves. But the best thing for people to do would actually be to present the most real version of yourself, because if you are real, if you show all of the warts and all and deal with the tough questions, like on the first date, get all the crap out, like get your politics out, do you want kids? Like get all of that stuff when you're not invested. Because if you guys don't agree, you don't care about this person. And so it's no big deal to walk away from it. I can even tell you that my husband, and I will also say, marry your best friend. My husband that I have currently, we were best friends for several months before. I mean, I genuinely believe he courted me in the most, old-fashioned kind of way. He had to persuade me, to see him differently. So by the time we ever made the decision to go on a first date, we had gone back and forth, and it was obviously also a big deal for us to change the dynamic. Could it work? And I remember we were on our first date, official date, and we did what was suggested in the David Wilcox. Like, we started talking about some of the issues we thought might be a deal breaker, might be a difference that would matter about whether eventually we were even on the same path and viewed these issues. There were some we forgot about, we didn't think about, because at the time, even if we had talked about them, we wouldn't have necessarily said anything. But, kids, those kind of things. And we talked about that. And at one point, I actually remember sitting back and going, did we just break up on our first date? Is that what just happened? Like, we went through all this to get to the first date, And now we're sitting here and we're realizing we may or may not be able to agree on this in the future. Like if this issue comes up, we might have to deal with that. And what are we going to do? And so are we deciding we're not going to bother?
Right.
And
Let
we
me
figured
just,
out.
yeah, go ahead. I want to go back to the question that was just up. How can I make sure I don't visit your office? Right.
Good question.
Don't get married. Don't get married. And you will
Or don't
not
have
come into
children,
my
right?
office. Think, and I'm serious. Why am I getting married? All right. So you don't have to be married to have children. Now, I know there's religion and there's culture and all these other pressures on people and your parents and whatever. But if you don't get married, you don't have to get divorced. Now, if you have a child with someone, you still may have to come in if there are custody issues. But, you know, a lot of what might be important to Dana and Judy wouldn't be important to me. I don't care what somebody's religion is. I don't care what language their first language is, as long as we communicate and we're attracted to each other. I'm not interested. I don't care about their politics. I don't care about any of that stuff. Why? Because it brings diversity into my life if we're not alike. And if they're intelligent and we can have a great conversation, and maybe I can learn about the world. The world's a lot bigger than just my world. So having been with people who speak different languages and from other parts of the world or have different backgrounds, I find that attractive, where other people might say, no, if they're not the same religion or the same XYZ. I think that's so silly that you're living your life in a bubble. You want to get out there and mix it up and be with someone that makes you the best version of yourself and makes you want to be the best version of yourself. That's my own opinion. So I love diversity in a relationship. I don't want to date myself. I want someone who's different and they bring something different to the party.
On the other hand, you know, depending on the individual, religion might matter a lot to them. So they might try to convert you. You know, they want to be in a relationship expecting to convert you to their side, you know, same with politics. So I don't know.
That's what I was just going to say. That would be one of the perfect examples of where an example with my husband and I, we didn't at the time have a discussion about where our political beliefs were because I wasn't hyper political and he wasn't. And it was only later that it actually became a thing that we discovered maybe we're not politically aligned. And that could have been a death knell if we had not found a way to resolve it, which, by the way, go to marriage counseling. If you're having communication issues or you're having issues arise, just even as a way to help to avoid becoming complacent in your marriage and in your relationship. I would say, I don't think it's about it. So divorce attorneys, anybody who gets married is going to go through a divorce if the marriage ends. I don't think anybody should feel like that makes them a failure because people stopped being the right partner for each other anymore. I think the most important thing that it's not about not making it to our office, because if you have assets, it's about how to not have it be very expensive and nasty, is to you know, as Jonathan suggested, if you have assets or anticipate acquiring assets over time, get a prenup. Because if you don't, guess what? Family law statutes are your prenup.
Absolutely.
They already tell you what's going to happen if you split up.
That's how I start every consult, right?
Yeah. So
every prenup consult.
Every family lawyer wishes we could do a lot more prenups, and sadly we don't. And sadly, I've had clients that they have been married and divorced, and I still can't get them to do a prenup. I mean, it's just like, you know, but certainly if it's a second marriage, if you have children from a prior marriage, even more so if you own a business. I think the other thing is if you have children, the thing to do that is the best thing for your children and that places your children as priority is to be able to not demonize the other parent.
Right.
And to rise above the personal conflicts with the other parent to act in the manner that is genuinely putting your children's needs first. And don't poison their relationship. Keep up, and that means even if really horrible things happen, even if your spouse cheated on you or you cheat on them, like that isn't about your kids. That's about you and your spouse. And guess what? Somebody can be a terrible spouse and a wonderful parent.
Right.
And getting somebody to realize that. So, I mean, I do a lot of custody stuff, and that's where the hardest stuff and the most conflict with our clients can occur, and that people will spend into bankruptcy fighting over parenting issues, and people will get dragged back into court over custody disputes. And that's why there are, in North Carolina, we have parenting coordinators that are essentially a referee to help people make joint custody decisions when they can't agree. It's because everybody wants people to think that they're going to walk out of a courtroom and be able to co-parent. But the truth is, if they were able to co-parent, they probably wouldn't be in this court.
Right.
They would have figured this out without going to court.
Right.
So that's
Judges
the
love
bigger
it
thing.
when, people can agree. And,
it's finding a way to rise above the pettiness and also get a freaking therapist. Like,
right.
don't pay your lawyer. Lawyers get paid a lot more money per hour
Right
to
on.
be your counselor. You don't,
We
that's
deserve
not
it.
our job.
We deserve it.
Yeah.
True.
We have to deal with a lot of crap in family law, but it would make our jobs easier if our clients would have a therapist dealing with all of that and would allow us to actually only focus on the legal issue.
Right on.
When you're wearing both hats because our client isn't getting those needs, we spend way more time dealing with emotional issues, dealing with reactions, volatility, that kind of stuff that is better spent and cost less for the client if it was dealt with by a mental health professional who can also turn out to be helpful for our case if we need them, and let us do our job, which is being a lawyer.
Right on.
Mhm.
Right
Yeah,
on.
that's correct. And a lot of the therapists are covered by health insurance too, whereas, the attorneys are charging hundreds and hundreds of dollars per hour. Yeah. But I think we should wrap this up because this has been well over an hour and everything. But I really appreciate you guys, all the insight, all the in-depth analysis of the Johnny Depp case. I mean, Dana, it sounds like you've really spent
I loved it.
100 hours of your life on this.
I'm still watching stuff. Like even now, I'm going through withdrawal right now, and so I'm still out there watching, the videos of people talking about Elaine's interviews and all of that.
Well, let me get you guys, or is this grammatically correct? Let me get your opinions on this. So one of the things that Elaine Bredenhoff said was that they are going to appeal. And one main issue that she thought the judge got wrong is that Amber Heard's therapy records for more than, say, the last 10 years or so were not allowed to be admitted into evidence because she had told her therapist about the times that Johnny had supposedly abused her.
You
I
mean
mean, but I
hearsay?
think that was the right call, though. What do you guys think? Should that have been admissible?
So I fully expected them to appeal.
Yeah.
That's just everybody
does.
Don't they have to post a bond for what she owes?
That could be the issue, is can she afford to appeal? And that's a separate animal. But it's not shocking under the circumstances that they're running out there playing victim still, spinning all the outcome. The complaints the most offensive thing about Elaine going out on TV and her interviews is that she keeps equating the UK trial as if Amber was the defendant. And Amber was a witness, which meant a crap ton of her personal records couldn't be addressed. Johnny had no ability to obtain mental health records, and a lot of discovery couldn't even get done or come in. I think if you think about even what one of her therapists talked about, just because Amber said it doesn't make it true.
Yeah.
That's part of the problem. Amber has said all of this stuff. So the fact that she said it to people at the time, I don't know how relevant that would be, and it would still be hearsay.
Yeah.
Right. I don't think that's a reversible error, keeping mental health records from 10 years ago out. I think that's a throwaway issue, and it will only weaken their appeal if they try to raise that on appeal. It's not relevant.
They already dealt with it in pretrial motions.
It was a motion in limine somebody filed to keep that out?
Oh, there have been so many motions that have been filed. I don't know about that one specifically, but there was lots of for the months leading up to this trial. I mean, that's, for what it's worth, that's the reason Johnny Depp, the deposition of his therapist came in was in lieu of, because Amber was asking for him to get a psych eval too. But here's the thing. If she had not filed those counterclaims, her psych eval wouldn't have even come in. Her mental state wouldn't have come in. She made it an issue with these ridiculous counterclaims, and she shouldn't have won, by the way, any of them. I think, going back to that, I think the jury misunderstood when we talk about the instructions. The instructions include a starting inference that shouldn't have been made to begin with, which is that the moment a lawyer speaks, they are the agent of the client, and that therefore, I mean, that would mean every time Judy or Jonathan or I are speaking, we are speaking on behalf of each and every one of our clients right now, and our words could be used to defame as vicarious defamation against them. That was a mistake. I think the other part of it is, I don't know that they fully understood actual malice. And I also think that the way the jury instruction, the verdict questions, they misunderstood for Amber's counterclaims. I do understand why the one that they ruled in her favor is that, because I don't know that it's true that, like, the Waldman statement was that they roughed the place up and then they called the cops back. And I don't know that there was evidence that that was intentional or that that happened. But the fact that that happened isn't the same thing. You know, I think that there was ample evidence that Waldman believed that that's what happened.
Right. Let me just go back to Judy's original question. I don't think there's any reversible error that I've seen. Now, I haven't gone through the entire record and I haven't seen the whole trial, but just based on what I've seen, I think I didn't see any evidentiary rulings, whether it was keeping stuff out or letting stuff in, that could convince an appellate panel to overturn this verdict. So, I mean, even if it does go on appeal, they're going to have to pick and choose their issues very carefully, because you'll send a clear signal to the appellate courts if you throw the kitchen sink at them. If you come up with 7 issues or more.
I don't think the appellate even gets it to oral arguments. I think it's going to get filed. The appellate court's going to review it and go, no.
I don't think.
Nice try.
Right. Yeah. They tried too good a case at the trial court level.
Too good. Depp's attorneys were brilliant. It was for lawyers. They should watch this trial for an advocacy course. Right. I wish I could figure out a way to submit this to the CLE, to the bar, to get CLE credit, because I think the skill level and the stuff that you learned, particularly if you watched it through the legal commentators panels that I was watching it through, it was a class. It was a 6-week long CLE.
Right. The thing is, most people should know that you don't get to retry your case on appeal if you lose. They only go by the cold, hard printed record, what was said at the trial. So the way that Depp's lawyers built their case through the evidence, through the testimony, they made it almost appeal proof. Now, nothing's 100%, but they have a huge hurdle, the other side, Heard's side, to try to get a reversible error. Just my opinion.
I frankly think Depp has a better shot at an appeal based on the problems in the jury instructions.
Yeah, I don't know if they'll even
He's
bother.
not going to, but
Appeals are expensive.
Interesting. Well, Dana, that sounds like maybe you should propose being a CLE speaker where you can examine the Johnny Depp versus Heard case and use
dress
it
up
as a teaching tool.
Jack Sparrow and give a class.
There actually was a YouTube lawyer that, LawTube, and there is one that went, because so many lawyers' websites or YouTube channels went from like 5,000 subscribers to like hundreds of thousands because of this trial.
Yeah.
And one of them, when he hit 100,000 subscribers, he actually got a costume and he went on a live stream dressed as Jack Sparrow, had a makeup artist come and do it. Somebody sent him, like, they make reproduction costumes of these things, and he looked freaking amazing.
Awesome.
But yeah.
Awesome.
Okay,
it was really cool.
All right.
So we should see Jonathan dressed up as Willy Wonka then to try to get more views on his channel.
Maybe let me think about it. Maybe we can come up with some good characters. But thank you everybody for all the questions.
Yeah, thank you all. Thanks to all the viewers who tuned in and everything. And this was so much fun. It's always great to get other attorneys, so it's not just me talking to myself. So why don't you guys stay on so we can chit chat a little bit and say goodbye, but we'll go ahead and say goodbye to everybody out there on YouTube land. And
bye everybody.
Thank you very much. Bye.
Take care.